found myself understanding for the first time how profoundly human it is to contemplate our mortality. And they obviously experience death too. They watch each other die. But as far as we know, they don't imagine something beyond death. We do. Somewhere around 250,000 to 50,000 BC, our earliest ancestors left us the first tangible evidence of mythological thinking. They buried their dead as if they were going somewhere. Evidence of food, tools, and sacrificial animals has been found in their grave as if to wish the dead back on God. The animal also seems to gratitude for their sacrifice or guilt over their murder. The hunters appear to have prepared them for the trip back home. High mountain caves have been found with bear skulls preserved ceremoniously and placed in symbolic settings. These early humans were obviously disposed to the possibility of another plane of existence, one they had to reckon.
Proud to welcome back some old friends with a brand new name, a band of gypsies.
Maharaj, he never talked to me specifically, or maybe once or twice, about the Gita. When I study the Gita and look at the things he said to me, they always turn out to be the same stuff. So I can feel the parallels there. And the other part of teaching the Gita is the honoring of a tradition. That I come out of the West as an intellectual, social, political Jew, and I go to India, and through a tradition, taken into a temple and through puja and kirtan and mantra and Guru Kripa and the satsang, I am opened to a great extent through this vehicle of this tradition. That opening in that tradition opens me in a way where then the next thing I start to study is the New Testament, which I never read, being a good Jew. And as I read the New Testament, I suddenly meet the living Christ. And now, slowly, you always come back to the original place last, perhaps, I'm beginning to get the joy and beauty out of the Chassid tradition.
Peanut mousse. No coffee.
There are a number of stages in the evolution of consciousness, a number of stages in the awakening process. Some of these stages are characterized in the Gita as you trace Arjuna's awakening through the 18 chapters. First there's despair, and then there's a possibility, and then there's a beginning of awakening, and then comes chapters 7 through 12, which are primarily the opening of the mystic vision and the deepening of the direct experience, and then comes the last part, which is when the faith is strong and the laying on of the heavy wisdom. That's the way that's spelled out in the Gita. We are representing in this group of people a variety of levels of consciousness, who you and I are. Some of us are just beginning to feel a little bit of malaise, a little bit of discomfort with the way the game's been going in life. And on the other end, some of you are so drunk with bliss of mystic vision that it's everything you can do to stay here and not go off into a cave. And people have to force you to eat because all worldly desire has fallen away. Some of you laugh cynically, some of you laugh knowingly, see? That's differences in stage. I'm going to read you a series of quotations about stages so you can get a feeling of what the range of the dance is. This is Jacob Boehme, the Christian mystic. The external world or the external life is not a valley of suffering for those who enjoy it, but only for those who know of a higher life. The animal enjoys animal life. The intellect, the intellectual realm. But he who has entered into regeneration recognizes his terrestrial existence as a burden and a prison. With this recognition, he takes upon himself the cross of Christ. Now, you can say, well, it's not all burden and prison. And whatever you answer to that, you're answering from where you are sitting. So if you don't judge, just listen and hear these all as a kind of a cut-up of stages. Matthew 13, for this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you, that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which you see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which you hear, and have not heard them. Uspensky, a student of Gurdjieff. But I had an inner conviction that something had already changed in me, and that now everything would go differently. Recognize that one? This is a nice one about Gurdjieff and Uspensky. Our friends found us becoming dull. Gurdjieff said, there is worse to come. He is an interesting man who lies well. You've already begun to die. It is a long way yet to complete death, but still a certain amount of silliness is going out of you. You can no longer deceive yourselves as sincerely as you did before. You have now got the taste of truth. That one we recognize. The line, you can no longer deceive yourself as sincerely as you did before. That word sincerely is just so essence. It's just how sincere we've been in our deception, in our self-righteousness. Ramakrishna, the nearer you come to God, the less are you disposed to question and reason. When you come up to him, when you behold him as the reality, then all noise, all disputations are at an end. Then it's time for sleep, for the enjoyment which comes in samadhi, in which one is in a state of communion with the blessed vision divine. A Zen statement. When an ordinary man attains knowledge, he is a sage. When a sage attains understanding, he is an ordinary man. So that when we finish this entire journey, we will then fully be the statement of nothing special. It's very reassuring, isn't it? Kabir. Dancing is not for me anymore. The mind no longer plays the tune. What was empty is now full. The vessel of desires is broken. The gown of desire has become frayed. All illusions are gone. Parts enough have I played. I can act no more. Friends and companions have all forsaken me. The restless ones are steady at last. All disputes are settled. Kabir says, by Ram's grace, he has found his full reward. Thomas Merton.
I barely slept.
As soon as
That's
a man is fully disposed to be
slept.
alone with God,
I did my laundry at
he
like
is alone with God no
12 and
matter
2.
where he may be.
You have to put it up.
In the country,
I was recording podcast
the
episodes.
monastery, the woods
Yeah, until 2.
or the city.
Then I felt like I could sleep,
The
and then I slept a
lightning
bit.
flashes from east to west, illuminating the whole horizon
The
and
second
striking where
laundry.
it pleases.
I was
And at the
too
same
down.
instant, the infinite
I mean,
liberty of
once
God
you are in
flashes
bed
in the depths
and
of
you've
that
worked
man's
your ass
soul,
off.
and he is illumined.
I just couldn't get up because
At
I
that
finally got
moment,
to
he
sleep
sees
a little.
That though he
It's so
seems to be
super
in the
chilled.
middle of his
I've
journey,
never slept like this in ages.
he has already arrived
Man,
at
that
the
was
end.
amazing.
For the life of grace
Cannabis
on
is really
earth
shit, I'm telling you. I mean,
is the
if you
beginning
smoke it
of
every
the
day,
life of
you should just
glory.
smoke it occasionally. Maybe
Although
like
he
smoke
is
it for a week
traveler in
and then stop
time,
for a month.
He has opened his eyes for a moment
Does that work?
in eternity.
I mean, what do you care? Yeah, that
And though
works.
some of that may be said in a way that's difficult for us to hear just yet. For example, the life of grace on earth is the beginning of the life of glory. And I say that perhaps by the end of the course, if not now, you
Yeah.
will recognize that you
And I
are
wore a hat
primarily
already.
no longer existing
So that
with
my
your
hair looks
basic
presentable,
identification
'cause
on the
people
plane
care
of
about this
reality
shit.
that you started out with. That you are already a novice or
And it's
a
enough to be-
participant in another
To feel a little
realm
bit mad
or
on the
loka
inside, you
or
don't have
plane
to
of
show it
consciousness
on the
that
outside.
becomes more real
If you can still
than
listen
the
to
one
Ramdas
you
while I'm
left
talking
behind.
here,
It, of
you've
course,
probably
will
learned
turn out
whatever
to be illusion
multitasking
too,
is.
But that will come in due time.
Well, let's just give Ramdas the I mean, it's in the morning and
these are
people
some
never
instructions to you
understood.
from Chuang
You know, I
Tzu
barely sleep, I get
about
up and
this
I'm like
course.
this. They're like, how can you be
Asked
like this?
directly.
Well, I don't know, right? And I just am.
Don't listen with your ears.
Just full
Listen with
on
your
all the
mind.
time.
No.
And that's the best way to live.
Don't listen with
If it's
your
hard
mind.
to do it when you're alone,
Listen with your spirit.
but I practiced.
Listening stops with the ears. The mind stops with recognition. But the spirit is empty and waits on all things. And the way gathers in emptiness alone. Emptiness is the fasting of the mind. It's easy to keep from walking. The hard thing is to walk without touching the ground. You see, part of our head trips about courses is we go back into a certain perceptual frame of reference about stuff. And who are we again? We are the researcher. We're the judger, collector, observer, analyzer, using our analytic mind and identifying with it. There is another way of doing this whole trip, and that is by being so empty, by being so non-judgmental. I mean, if you're taking 3 or 4 courses, you will go insane if you try to analytically bring it all together, because there is an incredible amount of paradox in the situation. And the rational mind will be boggled, I assure you. Now, I have no trouble whatsoever loving Trungpa taking teachings from him, loving Maharaji taking teachings, going to a Christian monastery taking teachings, sitting in Zen Buddhism and taking teachings and solving koans. To me, it all comes together, but I wouldn't try to analytically tell how it comes together. It comes together because I decided at one stage of the game to open Pandora's box and let it all in. And whatever would float, would float. I even remember when it happened. It was back at Harvard, and Tim Leary and I were doing research on psychedelics at Harvard. And Harvard was getting a little concerned because we had just ordered $500,000 of LSD from Switzerland. And they set up a watchdog committee, which was unheard of for faculty members to watch over each other. but it was getting pretty desperate. And we couldn't, I was on that committee with other men, and we couldn't agree on anything. And so finally, some of the faculty had a public meeting in order to put down our work. And the thrust of the meeting was that we were not scientific, mainly because we were ingesting these chemicals ourselves. And how could you be a scientist when you were changing your perceptual viewpoint in the midst of your observing study? Now, there is a very rich tradition in psychology called introspectionism, but that's in very low repute because of the takeover of behaviorism. And in behaviorism, everything must be publicly reproduced. It brought physics as a model for human study, and therefore rejected all inner experience other than what could be said outwardly and written down and then studied as the written material, not as what would happen inside. And Timothy took the stand, I am a scientist, you people don't understand what science is. And Timothy happens to be a damn good philosopher of science, and I think he had a very good argument. And he protested that they were persecuting science because of their own position. I was experiencing being caught in the middle of the situation that the most powerful things that had ever happened to me were happening to me through every Saturday night. And that somehow that was more real to me than what I was doing teaching Freudian psychodynamics on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I was not sure that I could bring that stuff together at that point, and I took the stance quite different from Timothy. I said, you're absolutely right, gentlemen and ladies. I am no longer a scientist. Turning in my badge, from now on I should be considered a datum. I'm data. And you may study me to see what happened to him who did that in the 60s, right? Too bad about poor Dick, that one, right? And you can study, and you can be the scientist. You can have the role. I give it up. He dwells for innumerable years in the heaven of those who did good. And then this man who failed in yoga is born again in the house of the good and the great. He may even be born into a family of yogis where the wisdom of yoga shines. But to be born into such a family is a rare event in this world. Now, if you can begin to reflect on your own life, as I do, as a continuing part of an unfolding drama, and that which family you took birth in, who your father turns out to be, who your mother turns out to be, who your brothers and sisters turn out to be, what experiences you have had thus far in your life, are all part of a predetermined karmic package. And that all this is running off perfectly lawfully. There is no chance in this system. The laws of reincarnation, the laws of karma are unbending. And there is no force in the universe that is aside from them. You say, well, isn't God aside from the laws of karma? Well, God, in a way, is the laws of karma. And there is a question of why someone would break their own law, though they have the capacity to destroy the whole thing with a thought, why he or she or it would do it. Now, all this that is talking about reincarnation sounds awfully solid, like you are somebody who is passing through birth and death and birth and death and birth and death. And who is that somebody? Who is that somebody? And to bring it together for you a little bit with other systems, let me quote again from the Pali literature. There are no real ego entities hastening through the ocean of rebirth, but merely life waves, which according to their nature and activities manifest themselves here as men, there as animals, and elsewhere as invisible things. every act you create, every act you do, depending on the desire connected with that act, which we're going to be talking about, creates in your mind what in Hinduism are called vasanas, or subtle thought forms, thought waves, and they remain. And when you die, they remain, because what dies is the physical body, and there are sheaths, and these sheaths go, and what are remaining are these subtle mental tendencies, which function like a DNA code, which determine the next round, if you will. And as you meditate more deeply, you will begin to see your own mind coming into existence, existing and dying, coming into existence, existing and dying, coming into existence, existing and dying. But over that continuity, you will see incredible repetitiveness of the nature of the content of those thought forms. It's interesting, the question is, if you create karma now and then you are born again, are you the same person that's reaping the karma who sowed it? And it's much like if you take a candle and light another candle, is it the same flame? Or is there merely a transmission from one to another to another to another, and really the person who's reaping the karma, like you, are reaping the karma of incredible past lifetimes? At one point in the Pali literature, the bhikkhus asked the Buddha, why did so-and-so, this very, very high being, why did he die such a horrible death? I mean, it isn't fair. He's been so pure, he's been so good, he's been such a high bhikkhu. Why should he die such a horrible death? And Buddha says, well, I'll tell you how it is. Some 500 births ago, he killed his parents. And he's been paying for it every birth since then. Now, I can experience in my own life that when I go to India and go into these villages and I find myself doing sadhana and sitting in a very simple environment, and realize that I came out of a Jewish middle-class Boston environment where 12 years ago, I didn't even know the word yoga. And if anybody had said, you know, 12 years from now, you'll be a yogi, when I was on the Harvard faculty, I would have laughed, because it's a drag. Because if I take that role, I've got to sit, and everything that comes near me, I've got to say, well, will I accept it? What is the probability of its reoccurrence? How many sigma, you know? And I've got to live in a probabilistic model and sit with the skeptical stance of doubt, which always keeps me a certain distance from the here, because I always have to be one thought away. And I realized I didn't want to be one thought away from life anymore. I wanted to dive into the soup and the hell with it, and whatever would happen, would happen. I wanted to get to the point where when I sit in India in a village, and people tell me stories about miracles that would turn the hair of Westerners gray, I'd say, yeah, of course, far out. And I can mean it. As far as I'm concerned, it's all true. Right? And if it isn't, that's its problem, not mine.
Look, I've got a little lid. It's actually from tea, but it fits perfectly. It's like, what?
Now, this puts some
Cheers.
burden on you.
I'm a very serious man.
Because I'm not
I'm
going
just
to
gonna listen
represent
to some
your
music,
superego.
which
I'm
I
not
think I
going to
won't
sit
share
and be
with you.
critical. I'm just going
I
to be
feel a little
data.
bit ashamed about it.
Right?
But
And
YouTube is
therefore,
just
you
so
have
picky.
the choice of which stance you will take. Are you going to say, oh, the hell with it, let's go? Or are you going to say, well, I'll watch and keep an open mind?
Let's
it was
see.
like...
I wanted to do another Piponga talk.
well, to show how many
I'll do it
incarnations
later.
you can cram into one lifetime.
I'm such a chatterbox.
Let me say that at Harvard, I was a member of a junta, a group of young Turks in the social relations department who were trying to toughen up the department by more statistics requirements and experimental methodology. Right. And at that time, when parapsychological phenomena occurred, I would say, very interesting. We certainly must keep an open mind. Okay, that was my professional position.
Ramdas
Then I
speaketh.
started to take psychedelics, and
Coming
all
to
these things started to happen
existence,
to
coming
me.
into existence,
And I
existing
said,
and
I have
dying, coming
ingested a
into
psychotropic
existence,
agent,
existing and
I am having a
dying.
hallucination, and it's fascinating. Okay? And then, a lot like what Carl Jung does in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, I said, fortunately, I can come back to my family and my home and to reality.
May.
That was another stage. Then, as time went on, it became less and less clear which one I was coming back to. And then, as I stopped worrying about that, which made you very edgy in terms of mental health, phenomena started to occur to me when I was not under a psychedelic. So I had no recourse to the fact that it hadn't happened to me, it had happened to somebody else. So I couldn't use the scientific one of very interesting, we must keep an open mind, because it just happened to me. Nor could I say, well, it was a psychotropic ingestion, this is a hallucination. So I was left without a defense. And there is a predicament about blessed are your eyes for they see, and your ears for they hear, that there are phenomena which we will be reflecting upon in this course that are available to her or to him who has not veiled herself or himself from them through attachment to your own thought. All of it is available to everybody, but it depends on who you think you are as to whether or not it is available to you. And that's why the stance you take in the way you are responding to education has a lot to do with whether or not you can totally grok Tibetan Buddhism, whether you can grok the Gita. Those of you that aren't familiar with that term, it's from Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, and it means become one with, be consumed into. Grok means that if we ground one of us up in a stew and the other one ate it, we would grok one another and it wouldn't matter who did the eating. Okay, that's Heinlein's definition of grok. They kept translating what they heard into their habitual language. They had ceased to hope and believe there might be anything new. Now, in designing the program for Naropa, my one request was that meditation be an integral part of the Institute, because it seemed to me that what we bring to a new environment are our predisposing set of thought forms, and that they filter everything so that nothing new ever happens. Have you noticed that? Like you come and you say, it's all going to be new in Boulder, and then later on you say, gee, you know, Boulder was just like San Francisco. I mean, you've been through enough of these by now. I know that I've thought I'm neurotic in New York, I'll go to Chicago, and I end up being just as neurotic in Chicago. Okay? Because you keep recreating your own hells, or heavens, whichever one you're attached to. And when you create this universe, you're creating it because your mind, you know, you walk into a new situation and immediately you label it in terms of your own attachments, and that's what we're going to talk lots about in this course. First of all, I am going to assume that everybody has read the Bhagavad Gita. It'll only take you about 3 or 4 hours to read anyway. May I suggest you read it the first time as a very interesting story. May I next suggest that you read the Gita twice more. The first time, after we have finished our discussion of the basic conflict that Arjuna finds himself in, and you have personalized that sufficiently to understand what the predicament is, that you read it identifying with Arjuna. That is, you read it as if you are in. That is, once you have realized what your own conflict is that gets you to itch enough to want to scratch to come to Boulder, right? Use that as the framework from which to read the thing and hear Krishna telling you how it is about your own battleground. And when you are ready, may I suggest a third reading of the Gita, in which you read it identifying with Krishna, because that, in fact, is who you truly are. Now, that will raise some interesting problems for you. because many of us have a difficult time thinking of ourselves as God. But don't let that upset you, because we have an exercise called contemplation, which suggests a way of approaching the study of the Gita, especially when you're doing this third reading where you're identifying with Krishna. Because you will read a line and you'll say to yourself, I never would have said that. See? But in fact, Krishna did say that. And we're opening ourselves to this book. So then you will sit down and you will take the line that you don't understand, and you will take the way you think it ought to be, and you will just sit with those two things. And you will sit with them. And you will sit with them. And you'll let your mind wander around it, and you'll come back to it. And you'll take the Gita shloka by shloka. Not every one of them. Sometimes you read a whole page and it'll be, oh yeah, sure, right on, I agree with that. And then you'll come to a line and say, what? You know, like I never would have said that. That's the one. That's the one, see? Just sit with it. Who's the I that would never have said that? See? Because these lines will show you where you're holding, where your stash is. See? This will show you where you... Right? You may end up underlining the Gita and stabbing Krishna in the heart. That's up to you. That's your problem, not mine, all right? But in the meantime, you will have the opportunity to work with this shloka by shloka as a contemplation exercise, and different things you can do as contemplation and stuff like that. And now those of you that want to leave, leave, and those of you that would like to sing are more than welcome to sing.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna.
Okay, this is pissing me off. Right? I think you've heard enough. This is Ram Dass, the Yogas of the Bhagavad Gita. Listen to it if you like it. And I need the space for another recording.